it was going downhill. Coming back.
Yeah.
Hi guys, welcome back.
This is what a wonderful job he had. So there's his ankle board, there's his seat that could be adjusted, and there's his feet there. That's the shovel he would use. It would be tied to between his boots, and that's the board he would be sitting on. It was called a crucifix. They used to employ clay kickers during the First World War. Both sides used to use them. They used to actually dig out from the front line trenches, tunnel underneath the enemy trenches to try and undermine the trenches themselves and maybe send soldiers along. Has anybody seen Peaky Blinders before? Yeah, Peaky Blinders they were clay kickers. So that's their job. Imagine doing that for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. So these are the people who actually constructed the actual tunnel itself. So the tunnel now is finished, and what's the wagons going to be like that's going to use them? Do you want to come down a little bit here? And if you're looking on the wall, there's a silhouette there. Can you see the silhouette? Yeah? These wagons are specially designed by William Gillespie to fit into the tunnel, and you can see there's not much room for manoeuvre, but Gillespie makes sure that every single space he can use is used up. So these are called chaldron wagons because they have a measurable amount of coal in each one. Now, as a Newcastle, chaldron can be sold all over the country, and it's 5,300 weights of coal. That's 2.6 metric tons per wagon. Now the train length is 8 wagons. 8 wagons equals what's called 1 keel, and it'll fit into a keel boat. And it'll also, the collier brigs took X amount of keels rather than chaldrons. Okay, so they knew how much coal were getting down to London. So these wagons will be hooked together with rope, and the last one, the one that was closest to the colliery, would have a hemp rope attached to it. Now that hemp rope was over 2 miles long, because that's how long the tunnel was. It was about 2¼ miles. Now 2¼ miles of hemp rope wound round a big drum. Once the wagons are full of coal and they're ready to go, the wagons are pushed off. Now then gravity takes over, picks up speed, and the wagons start to roll down by themselves. And the rope is unwound from the drum. Now to make sure they don't go too fast and they stop, more importantly at the other end, there's a steam engine, a temporary steam engine attached to the big bobbin to control the speed of descent. And it can also tell when the rope is starting to wind out, and they'll put the brakes on and stop the wagons as they run out to the river end, because they'll run out onto a wooden projectile into the river called a staith. Now the staith is like a pier with a railway track on top of it. As the wagons are stopped, at the bottom end, the teamers who are working on the staiths, their job is once the train has stopped, and if there's a collier brig ready to take the coal, or a keelboat ready to take the coal, they will go to the bottom of each one of these wagons and undo the trapdoors at the bottom of each wagon. The wagons, once the trapdoor opens, the coal will then team out through the hole in the bottom of the wagon, through the lines, and there's a hole into the staiths which goes down to a chute, and that chute goes straight into the hold of the colliers. So the coal is discharged very quickly from the wagons straight into the hold of the collier brigs. Once the wagons are emptied, the doors are closed, and the engine driver at the colliery puts the engine into reverse and pulls the empty wagons back up to be refilled and the process to be repeated. Now there's only one problem about this. In 1842, how does that engine driver know when these are empty or ready to be brought back? Well, of course, he just looks on his mobile phone, he says, let's see what, no. 1842, get a radio? No. Telephones? No. How does he know? He's over 2 miles away. And the answer is quite simple and it's quite clever. And it's right behind you in that wall there. And you see those holes in the walls. You see them all the way along this side. That's no coincidence. That's not people taking souvenirs out of Victoria Tunnel. Inside each one of these holes would have been a wooden block. That block would have been jammed in tight. Into the block would be a screw, and that screw would be drilled into that wooden block and would have a loop on it. So it would be all these screws with loops on them. Through all these loops is passed a thin wire. That thin wire is like piano wire, and it's held at attention from both ends. When the wagons are ready to be taken back to the colliery, the stage manager raps on the wire. The vibration travels the full length of the tunnel and rings a bell at the colliery. Once the bell rings, the engine driver knows it's safe to pull these wagons back. It's called the rapper system. So if anybody tells you the Americans invented rap, I'm afraid the Victorians are way ahead of them. So it works a treat, it's fantastic. The lads have had a party. But what about the great and the good? What about the important people? What about the people who's put the money up? What about Port and Latimer who own this country? They haven't had an excuse for a party, have they? So let's have an excuse for a party. Let's have an official opening. So in April 1842 we'll have an official opening, and we'll also name the tunnel, because up until then it had been the Spittletongues Colliery Wagonway Tunnel. So I know what we'll do, we'll call it after the Queen. The Queen's been on the throne since 1837. She's very, very popular. Railway stations have been named after, waterfalls have been named after, why not the tunnel? So this is the excuse for a party, 7th of April 1842. The invitations go out and there's a big marquee erected at the river end, and people are told to arrive for 1 p.m. in the afternoon. That's except the VIPs. The VIPs, which will be the Lord Mayor of Newcastle, the Lady Mayoress, the Sheriff of Newcastle and his wife, Port and Latimer, various bankers who have put the money up. All these VIPs are told not to report to the colliery. They've got to go, they've got not the river end, they go to the colliery, and their invitations say 12:30, not 1 o'clock. So these VIPs arrive ready to go to a party, so they're all going to be dressed up in their best stuff, aren't they? All the fellas with their top hats and tails and the badges of office, and the lasses with their posh frocks on, they're going to a party. And what's waiting for them at the colliery? Well, there's 8 wagons just like that, waiting for them. And this 8 wagon train is made up as follows. The first 4, that's the front 4, are made up because they're full of coal. Because we don't want to waste this trip, do we? You know, we're not going to waste this. There's ladders up against the next 2, which have been cleaned out especially for our VIPs. Our VIPs have to clamber up and get into these specially cleaned out wagons. And in the back 2, and you couldn't make this up, is a small orchestra. So it's in total darkness. So off they go, and they come through the tunnel, and it takes them about half an hour because they slow it right down so they can appreciate this wonderful feat of engineering in complete and utter darkness. And as you can see, if you look again at the top there, how much, if you actually did poke your head over the top to have a look, you get a face full of coal that's from the wagon in front of you. Because remember, the first 4 have got coal in, and the walls are also covered in stuff. So when these VIPs eventually arrive at 1 p.m, there's cannons go off, and there's a great celebration. The ladders are put up against the wagons, and our now slightly grubby VIPs clamber down the wagons, out the wagons, and off they go into the tent to have some food and drink. They have a great time. Food is all finished, drink is all finished, and the survivors decide, let's party on. We're going off to the assembly rooms, and off they go to Fenkell Street to carry on drinking, celebrating. And there's a book there in the assembly rooms, and there's a record of the toasts that were made that night. There were 47 toasts drunk that night. That's after they've been on the drink all day, mate. That's nearly as good as me when I was down with Burnley. And 47 toasts drunk to anything you want. How about the Queen? The Queen! How about the tunnel? The tunnel! How about you? You! We'll drink you as well. So they had a great time. Great night. Great afternoon. And then 6 months later, there's a big accident in the tunnel. What's happened? You know that rope I was telling you about? Hemp rope, great for use on sailing ships. But in this atmosphere of abrasive coal dust, the coal dust had worn through the rope, and the rope snapped as the wagons were coming down one Saturday morning. Now, the wagons have now lost their brakes. So the pick-up speed, and it's called running a main, and the pick-up speed, and at the staith's end, the teamers hear this noise and think, that's not normal, there's something wrong with them wagons, let's get out of the way. And sure enough, the wagons come shooting out the end, straight into the river tank. 8 wagons, straight, full of coal, in the river tank. The word gets back to the colliery, the work stops at the colliery, all the miners are told, get down the tunnel, and when the tide goes out, get those wagons back quick before the locals realise there's 8 wagons full of free coal in the river tank. wait for the river tide to go out, and the miners rescue the 8 wagons, most of the coal, put the wagons back onto the tracks, the rope is repaired, not replaced, and it carries on as if nothing had happened. Sure enough, about 6 months later, the same thing happens again, only it's not in the place where it repaired, it fails again at another point, and the wagons again run out of control, the teamers hear the noise, oh, they've run a man, get out the way lads. Unfortunately, the collier brig that was tied up waiting to get his coal, he can't get out of the way, and he gets his coal a lot faster than he planned, and you also get the added bonus of 8 wagons as well. Now remember, this is a wooden ship, so these wagons go straight through the bottom of his ship, and his ship sinks at its moorings. Now this might have been sounded hilarious to anybody else but Lloyd's of London, who actually insure this vessel. They are not pleased with this, and they tell Port and Latimer, unless that rope is replaced with a steel hawser, no one is going to, and insured by us, is going to use that stayth. So Port and Latimer have to go to the expense of actually replacing that rope with a steel hawser. So, no one was killed during the construction. No one was killed in this tunnel during the Second World War. But if you feel a presence in this tunnel, that's because someone did die in this tunnel. And I'm going to tell you their story right at the end, which is not going to be very long. Okay? Is everybody all right? Yeah? Okay. What we'll do is we'll walk down this wall. Before we go any further, I just want you to stop here just for a second. I just want to come up a little bit. I just want you to have a look at the roof here. Can you see the roof here? It does come down a little bit. You can see that? From here to here. We believe this is one of the access shafts because you notice that the bricks, this is a sort of bit of a crude repair put in not so long ago, but the bricks don't key in. We think this is one of the shafts that was used to dig the original tunnel out. So this will give you an idea of where the 2 clay kickers would start back to back around about this side here. So that's, and then all the clay would go up this shaft to the surface and come back down. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Do watch your heads, please, and watch the walls, please, because this is the dirty bit. what's happened to our lights?
Oh, it's the end of the month. They haven't paid the electricity. Oh, right.
Right, all these lights are not on, isn't it? Right, do you want to turn all the lights off? Because this is going to be a scary story, man. I like to keep my scary story for the last. Alright. If you're wondering how much this tunnel cost to build, it cost £140,000 in those days, which is about just under 15 million. And now for that, they actually got the tunnel, they got the tracks, they got the wagons, they got the stairs, they got the engine, the lot for that price. I think it was quite a reasonable one. And Port and Latimer saved 88% of their transportation costs. So as a project, I thought it's pretty good, I think. So as brilliant as they were in allowing this project to go ahead and get the finance and everything else, Port and Latimer, apart from that, weren't very good businessmen. Because in the early 1850s, they started running into financial problems. And now that was because of the coal seam they were digging into. The Lease's main seam was not only bringing out poor quality coal, that means you couldn't sell it to factories and you couldn't send it to mills and places like that because it wasn't good enough. It was only good enough for domestic use. That means you could only use it for burning in fires in the house. So they weren't getting the price they thought they were going to get for the coal. Not only that, but the seam itself was badly fractured in places. And that means that the coal, the miners would be digging coal out and then the seam would disappear. That's because it suddenly dropped either 6 feet up or 6 feet down, or maybe a few feet either side. So the miners would have to spend time looking for the seam again before they could start bringing coal out. Cut a long story short, Port and Latimer not only run into financial difficulties, they go bankrupt. Now the bank who's provided the money for this project, or most of the money for this project, is the Northumberland and District Bank. Does anybody bank with the Northumberland and District Bank? I'm not surprised because they tried to run this thing. They tried to run the colliery and run the Victoria Tunnel, and they lasted a year before they went bankrupt. But they did leave a legacy. They left their headquarters in Newcastle. If you want to know where that is, it's on Grey Street in Newcastle, just up from the Theatre Royal in Newcastle, and it's the Lloyds Bank building. That used to be the headquarters of the Northumberland and District Bank. So they have gone bankrupt, so the tunnel and the colliery are now up for sale. This is 1852. They're both up for sale, and hopefully they're going to try and find a buyer, and some of the creditors are going to be paid off. People aren't interested too much in the colliery, but there are people who are interested in the tunnel itself. Now these are two brothers, these are Ralph and Benjamin Arklas. Now they're colliery viewers. Now colliery viewers are like colliery managers, and they can also manage quite a few collieries at the same time. So they're quite high up, they know their business about coal. They believe they can make a go out of the Victoria Tunnel, using it as a sort of coal conduit from other collieries, running them through their wagons, and also various other goods, running it through under Newcastle into the river for export. But they want to have a look at it, they want to inspect it before they actually buy it. So the process for inspecting the tunnel in those days was you sent a note to the colliery manager. The colliery manager had to approve it and say, yes, that's okay to come in, and once you got your reply, in you come. Yeah? So the two brothers, one afternoon, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, present themselves to William Armstrong Coulson, who is the stairs manager at the river end, and say, okay, we have sent a note up to George Fletcher, we'll give it to a little laddie. He said he knew where Spittletongue's colliery is, we gave him a farthing, send him a note off to George Fletcher, who's the colliery manager, and said, we're coming in to inspect the tunnel. And it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and here it is, sir, it's 1 o'clock. And Armstrong Coulson, William Coulson, says, well, I don't know anything about this, he hasn't told us, but I'm not really surprised, because he's not very good with paperwork, is he? And the brothers say, yeah, he's no good with paperwork. Yeah. And then Coulson says, well, did you get the note back off him to say it was okay? No, we didn't. I'm sure it's on his desk though, somewhere. And Coulson's a little bit reluctant after this, and thinks, well, I shouldn't really let you come in, you know, he hadn't had the receipt. But I know what he's like with this sort of thing. But anyway, he's persuaded by the two brothers, who say, well, you know, we'll go somewhere else, we've got other things to do. And the two brothers persuade Coulson to come in and help them with the inspection. So the two brothers and Coulson are walking up the tunnel, inspecting the brickwork, making sure that standard gauge railway lines are all in place, there's no obstructions on the lines, and maybe some minor repairs still to do, and they're inspecting the tunnel going up. At the other end of the tunnel, the letter arrives on George Fletcher's desk, the colliery manager, and he opens the note and it says, "Send no wagons after 1 o'clock." That's all it says. Send no wagons after 1 o'clock. Hasn't got a date on it, hasn't got a day on it. So he looks at his watch and it says 1:45 in the afternoon. So he assumes it must be for tomorrow. So he puts it into action the next day. Now he's given two lads a job to do. Now these two lads, this is at the colliery end, this is Peter Downey and Thomas Natras. Peter Downey is about 15-year-old and Thomas Natras is about 17-year-old. They've been employed by the company to tidy the site up until it's sold. Now their job is to get as much rubbish as they can to make the site look tidy, put it into one children wagon. And now this is an adapted children wagon. It's got a platform on the front and a platform on the back. The platform on the front is for Peter Downey to sit once the wagon's full. He has a little lantern and his job is to ride the wagon down at the front and he's checking for any obstructions on the line. Natras at the back, his job is to push the wagon off and jump on the platform. Because not only is there a platform at the back, there's also a handbrake as well to slow the wagon down and eventually stop it when it gets out at the river end. And then the two lads have been told to jettison all the rubbish straight into the River Tyne. So that's fly tipping. That was illegal even in 1852. Nevertheless, that's the job they've been given to do. They haven't been told to stop working, so the two lads fill this wagon up to the brim with rubbish. Downey sits on the front and says, "Right, Tommy, give us a push." Natras gives the wagon a push. He goes to jump on the back. He misses his footing, falls flat on his face. He gets up just in time to see the wagon disappear. It's gone, and it's picking up speed. He runs after it. He hasn't got a chance of catching it. It's away. Now at the front, Peter Downey, he has no idea of what's happening. All he knows is this wagon is going along and it's getting a bit fast. And he can't see his mate, but he shouts nevertheless, "Tommy, man, put the brakes on, man. Tommy, put the brakes." What's happened to Tommy? And then he realised something must have happened to Tommy. Oh, wait a minute, I can't get over. I filled the wagon up with too much rubbish. I can't get across the top. And I can't get around the sides. Did you see that? The silhouette, there's no space on the sides. How am I going to stop it? Then he realises he ain't going to stop it. This wagon's going to run down, out of control, and when it gets to the other end, it's going to go shooting out into the river. And he's going to go into the River Tyne. Now, if the tide's in, he's going to drown. And this wagon is also going to land on top of him. If the tide is out, he's going to land in the mud, and 2.5 tons of wagon are going to land on top of him. He's going to be crushed to death. Either way, he's going to die in the next few minutes. But could you imagine what the lads think as they walk this way? And they hear the sound. And then you think, what's that? What's just happened there? If you were one of these three men walking up the tunnel, you've got to make a mind up within the next few seconds about what you're going to do. And these three men did three different things. I'm going to put all the lights back on. So we'll have the youngest of the three. So this is Ralph Arklas, the youngest of the three, and he must have had ice water in his veins. He actually faces the wagon, lies flat on the floor between the two rails and moves slightly to one side just in case there's a chain hanging down. He doesn't want that cracking into his head, does he? and this wagon goes straight over the top of him. And he's completely unhurt. He survives, he's shocked, he's dirty, and when he gets up and he thinks, I must change these trousers out. His brother decides, I'm slim, I'm going to press myself right up against the wall. Well, I am slim, but I am not slim enough. And this wagon rattles into the side of him. It smashes his legs and it smashes his hips. He's crippled for the rest of his life. He's badly hurt, but he never walks and never works again. Coulson, the oldest of the three, runs for it. Now you're about a mile into the tunnel, remember, when this accident happens, and this wagon is going at about between 25 and 30 miles an hour. And he's running in almost total darkness, not on a flat floor, on a floor with railway sleepers. He doesn't stand a chance. That bang you heard was the wagon hitting Coulson, throwing him onto the rails, and then it runs him over, kills him outright. But Coulson's body saves the life of Peter Downey, who is still sitting on the front of this wagon. Because as it runs over Coulson's body, it derails the wagon. The wagon hits the tunnel wall and stops. And it comes to a sudden stop, throwing Downey clear, and he lands between the rails with a thump. So as cuts and bruises, he's badly shocked, but apart from that, he doesn't break a bone. He does survive. So Coulson saves his life. A few days later, there's an inquest held. Because they don't look around in those days. An inquest are really quickly held. And it's held in the aptly named Tunnel Inn Public House. And the coroner, Justice Hoyt, gets Peter Downey into the witness box and to ask him a question. Now we think Downey has been briefed on the answer, but I'll let you be the judge of that. But remember though, this is Peter Downey, who's been in the colliery, worked in the colliery since he was 8 years old. He's never ever been to school in his life. Local lad from Baker. Alright? Now the judge says to him, Mr. Downey, did you not shout any words of warning when you saw these poor gentlemen's lights in front of you? He says, yes, Your Honour, I did. I shouted, have a care, gentlemen, for today I think we may all perish. Yeah? Yes. I think there'll probably be something a bit shorter than that. Anyway, the man who was blamed for the accident, took the blame, was George Fletcher, the colliery manager, because he allowed the wagon to come in and he had a note to say that there were people in the tunnel. Which is just as well, because if Coulson was been at fault, and remember he allowed him to come in without a receipt, if Coulson had been at fault, his widow and family, who lived in a colliery-owned house, would have been evicted from the house. And that in those days would have been, the wage earner had gone, the wife and the daughters would have went to one workhouse, and knew that the sons would have went to another workhouse. So they were saved that fate, they were given a small pension and allowed to live in the cottage. Fletcher wasn't too bothered because he had already got a job in Canada and he was off to Canada, and the CV didn't follow them across the Atlantic in those days. Okay. There was a small postscript to this as well. A sporting postscript, I'll hasten to add. William Armstrong Coulson, he had a grandson called William Armstrong Coulson, who was a school teacher on Raby Street. And he was also a good cricketer and a good footballer. He became the first captain of a football team called Stanley FC from Stanley and Baker. That team changed its name and moved to Chillingham Road and became Newcastle East End. And again, Coulson was the first captain. And then when West End collapsed, East End moved to St James Park and became Newcastle United. So our William Coulson's grandson was the first captain of Newcastle United. So we've got a link with it too. What do you think of that? Anyway, that's the end of our little tale today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it. The two guides today have been the wonderful Michael there, who's told you all about the Second World War. And my name's Jeff. I've told you about the 19th century story. If you'd like to leave us a review, we'd love to hear what you had to say. Yeah, and you can help us a little bit further. As you go out, if you can just hang your hats, please, on the hooks and just put the torches on the tables. And if you've got any spare change, if you've got a little collecting box, because we are all volunteers, we do it because we're mad. And this place is a charity as well. Okay.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And he's been here since the first lockdown. Yeah.
Right guys, well, that's the end of the tour. You see I've got the helmet on for safety. To hang this hat back up now.
If you leave the torch,
Oh.
we have to plug them all into
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So there you are guys, that was the tour of the Victoria Tunnel. Back out in the sun now, and there's the other people who are on their tour as well. Fresh air at last. Well guys, that's it now, and I'll see you